nobody can be you.
Yeah.
That's your strength. You
Yeah.
might think it's a weakness, but I'm telling you, in the end, if you're honest and transparent about who you are and what you are and how you, if you're not the best person, how you're working to change, and they follow your journey, nobody can duplicate that. Hey everyone, welcome to the Big Fitness Show, episode 63. I point out it's take one and I got it right the first time, but
Yeah.
man, that doesn't seem right now. I shouldn't do that. I should just go straight through. Episode 63.
Yeah.
What's your identity? Find
Yeah.
your identity. We're not sure quite what the title is,
Sure.
but the theme of this, I think, can speak to a lot of people, and especially in the age group we're in, men over 40, men over 50, more than ever in 2024. I think people are losing their identity. They're losing their path. They're losing their focus. And you're talking to two people that are in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
Myself, along with my best friend and best co-host in the world, and he is the draw. He's the draw, not me. He doesn't need a fancy studio with acoustic panels. Big Mike Burns.
Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate that. I'm not the draw, but I will say that your studio, for those of you watching the YouTube channel and for those of you listening on audio, I mean, definitely check out the YouTube channel. Stevie's new setup is awesome. I'm going to go full screen here for you for real quick, just to show everybody. So you see, look at that setup. It's so awesome. I'm actually kind of jealous of it. I was telling them before we started recording that I was super jealous of it. And it looks great. The new setup is awesome. Go to his channel and check out the new studio tours and stuff, because it looks super cool. Makes you look way cooler than you are.
Exactly. That's what that's the goal. The only thing I saw was the outlet cover there cut around the panel. So I have to take care of that, or at least move over in front of it.
Oh, shoot.
If you go to widescreen, you'll see it, and now you can't unsee it.
Let's go. Oh, yeah, there it is.
I killed it. There it is. Damn it.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, yeah. So today's episode, we're going to talk about finding your identity. This is something that I feel like the two of us struggle with sometimes when it comes to what's our identity and how we present ourselves to the world and what we're focused on and what our goals are. And then I think that there's a foundation of our identities and our faith. I mean, that for both of us, I think just off the top, like that's the most important identity that either one of us have. But everything stems from there, right? So what is your identity look like in relationships, in career, in work, in what you're trying to do in a side hustle, whatever that is, whatever your identity is in your fitness, it's how do you find that? How do you figure out what that is? And I think specifically for men, like it's right now, guys my age, they don't know who the hell they are. They have no idea. They've been told to be a million different things, don't know who they are, who they want to be, what they should be, what they shouldn't be, all these kind of things. And I think it's a really important conversation to talk about finding your identity. You know, we just pulled back the curtain a little bit real quick. We just talked about this concept, this idea right before we started recording. So neither one of us have really fully fleshed out our thoughts on what this means, but both of us were talking through this exact thing.
It's every meeting we have had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is. And so it's something that we just constantly struggle with as it relates to what we're doing and the content we're creating. What is the identity that we want to present ourselves as? Who are we? You know, what's our audience? Who are we talking to, and how do we want to come across? And so it's a conversation that we have, but I think it's so pertinent for everybody listening, because how is that translating to your career, to your work? When you go to work every single day, how are you showing up? What's the identity that people see, and how do you create this idea of who you are, or live that identity too? You know, like I'm already on the tangent, but there's this thing called an integrity gap when it comes to your identity, right? Like you have, and I experienced this years ago. I realized I was living outside of integrity of who I wanted to be. So there was this vision of who I wanted to be on one side, and this reality of who I am on the other side. And so my identity was this, lack of a better way of saying it, turd of a guy that wasn't fully stepping into who he wasn't being the best example that he could be. But I had this vision over here that I wanted. And so how did I make this identity align with this identity? And it was just figuring out those steps to get there was what was life-changing, of realizing, oh, hey, I'm not this guy. I think that's another piece of it too, to keep going on the tangent, is what's not your identity too. Like, I had to realize that my identity is not who I was 10 years ago, not who I was 20 years ago, and all the baggage that comes with that. So that's my initial thoughts on this identity conversation. I'm going to turn it to you now and ask, what's your initial thoughts on this identity conversation?
Well, I wouldn't preface this or really drive this point home to everybody listening and watching is finding your identity doesn't mean in a phony way. We're talking about trying to find our comfort zone, our rhythm, what
Mm,
the real authentic us can be. Now we don't go out there and be phonies or anything, even though throughout our wrestling career we were paid to be phonies. We
sure.
were paid to be completely different characters in that. And in our situation, and in mine, especially growing up as a pretty shy, passive, introverted kid and being bullied a lot, I always wanted to make pretend I was somebody else, somebody larger in life, somebody much cooler than I already am, much like you talked about my set. Makes me look cooler than I am. Uh, and I agree.
Oh,
But
shoot.
but that's the danger in pro wrestling. And we see it on the other end of that with wrestlers our age and older,
Mm,
where their identity is strictly tied to being a professional wrestler,
mm,
being their stage name, all this stuff you see it in Hollywood more than anything in sports as well. When the lights go off, when the bright lights go off, and you're there and it's your life and it's your own thoughts and it's your family you may have neglected for years or decades because you've been on the road, that's when you really need to start soul searching and finding what's my true identity. Because if you, this is just kind of skipping all the way ahead to kind of the end.
yeah.
If you end up doing a lot of what you see these entertainers, wrestlers, athletes do post career of hanging on to the past,
Hmm.
you're going to be in a very dangerous situation because now essentially what you're doing is you're plugging yourself, I guess, for lack of a better way of using a metaphor, you're plugging yourself into your own matrix that you're
Mm,
never going to unplug from and you're
sure.
never going to fix the problem because those days are gone. I'm sorry. Days are gone for me. We're still looking forward whether the days are gone for you or not as far
Right.
as getting closure with your wrestling career. But when you hang on to that, that's a very that's the old Al Bundy married with children, state high school football hero.
Yeah.
And now it's my turn for a tangent. But
Yeah.
I thought, because we talked about it before the show. I think I am going to put out a video saying my life after professional wrestling.
Mm,
Because maybe a wrestler will look at that and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I need to be much more proactive and make sure that I don't have the years or the decade plus of wandering in the desert trying to find out what my identity is post
right.
wrestling. Dude, I didn't know what my identity was or where I was at the time until Stevie Richards Fitness. And that's
Mm,
from '08 getting released from WWE until 2016, 17.
yeah.
Whew, that's a
Yeah.
long time.
It
And
is.
now at 40 in our 40s and 50s, guess what we're trying to do? Rediscover what our identity is supposed to be now. So
Yeah.
there's my tangent.
Yeah. No, but I think you touched on something there that is good. And I think it needs to be addressed of why the importance of finding your identity and not hanging on to things from the past. Because yeah, you might have done something in the past, like I think about it a lot. Like, everybody does stupid shit. Everybody. I don't care who you are. Everybody has done something stupid. It's just to what degree of how stupid it is. Some people might have robbed a bank one day, and that was pretty stupid. But some people might have just stole a candy bar. Some people might have just showed up 5 minutes late to work and you stole the company's time, right? Like, silly things. There's just different degrees of the stupid things that we do that can carry so much weight and carry so much uh, stuff that you don't even realize it. And I think it gets to the point where when you're thinking about your identity, you need to first figure out what you feel like your identity is right now, and not focus on or get lost in, I guess is a better way to say it. Don't get lost in the day to day and not know who you are. You need to take some time, do some deep work, and really think about, who am I? What is it that's really driving what I do every day? Take a look at your day. Figure out if your day is productive? Do you feel like you're having a productive day at the end of every day? Do you feel like today was worth it? Do you feel like everything you did today was in alignment with who you are as a person, with the things that you want in life? And that's, to me, I feel like that's a great starting point, because that you can't get to a new identity or really fleshing out who you are if you don't know where you're currently at and anything that's holding you back. And so you have to address the past. And I know for me, when it was time to really truly step into the man that I am today, it was, what are all the things that are holding me back? Like, I was an athlete in high school, I was an athlete in college, and there was a bit of ego that came with that, a bit of arrogance, cockiness, whatever you want to call it, of how I then carried myself into my 20s and how I treated people and all this kind of stuff, because that was how I acted. And there's been other issues of mistakes that I've made, stupid things that I've done, ways I've treated people that have haunted me for years, because, man, I think to myself, man, I was such a piece of shit then. I was such a piece of shit. But that guy that I was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is not the same guy that I am today. So when I finally was able to take stock of where I'm at and kind of release some of that stuff in the past, because maybe you have totally screwed up. Maybe you've worked at a dead end job. Maybe you've been not the best husband. Maybe you've not been the best father. Maybe you've not been the best friend to people, but that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. And so you got to take stock and really realize, where am I at today? What am I thinking? And what is out of alignment with who I want to be? And so I would encourage everybody to write down the ideal version of yourself. When you're operating at a 9 or a 10 on the scale of how you feel every single day, who are you? What do you look like? What does that mean to you? And so for me, just to give an example, when I'm operating a 9 or a 10, my wife and I are happier than we can possibly be, loving life, spending great time together. My kids are happy. I'm happy. We're all getting along. We're doing family fun things. I'm working out every day. I'm eating healthy. I'm taking care of myself. I'm having great conversations with people. My business is thriving. I'm making money. I'm putting out good, valuable content to help people live healthier every single day. That's me operating at a 10. Now that I have an ideal version of what that looks like, what does it actually look like? What's the reality? Like, I can check all the boxes. I can see, well, are my wife and I getting along today? Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing great. Are the kids happy? Yeah, we're good. Did I eat great today? I don't know. I kind of fell short. Did I work out today? Damn it. No, I didn't. So now I'm not operating here. So it's like, you got to have this picture of where you are and what your ideal identity is before you can start to step into that. So figure out what it was in the past and what's holding you back, where you're at right now. But unless you have the ideal version of that, you're not going to be able to get there, because you don't have a target that you're working towards. And so I know that was a lot, but really you got to take assessment of, for a starting point, you really got to take an assessment of where you're at and figure that out first, and then figure out where you want to go. And now we're talking about, okay, what do we do to take the steps to make our identities in alignment with each other?
I just want to be the first person you kill in Butcher and the Baker Part 2. That's all I want. That's all I want. That's it.
That's totally out of left field, but hey.
Well, you have to, the thing is, you have the thing with being a movie star and a pro wrestler now to overcome, and now you're a civilian. What are you going to do, man? Hey, by the way, a little Easter egg, little movie trivia for you. Kane's first movie, See No Evil.
Uh-huh.
And this is when Glenn and I were riding together all the time, playing video games, and having a great time. This is the best part of being a wrestler at WWE, be able to do those kinds of things outside the arena. Being at the show, not so much, but but I was supposed to be the first person he killed in See No Evil, but the company wouldn't give me time to go and shoot the scene. And I was actually going to cut my hair, because it was a security guard or a police officer. Whoever he killed is Jacob Goodnight in the first scene of that movie. That was supposed to be me. So Easter egg. for about a day. I mean, Glenn wanted to kill. He said he always wanted to kill me. So I guess that has to do with that.
Well, how about this? If Butcher the Baker's 2 ever happens, um, I will do my best to make sure you're the first person I kill in that
Nice. Sounds good.
movie.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna hold
You might have to pay for your own plane ticket to get here, but
that'll be my identity. That'll be the claim to fame.
There you go.
I would say this too, like everything you just explained about if you're at a 9 or 10, you're functioning, you're able, you're on you have a rhythm, you're on a roll, you're productive, and all this and that. Here's a question. If so, if you feel that way throughout the whole day, how come both of us, when we both feel that way at the end of the day, what do we tell ourselves?
Mm,
Haven't done a
yeah.
damn thing.
Yeah. Sure.
Now, this is, I don't know if this is a rhetorical question or not. Is that because we have no idea what our true identity or direction is, or the identity and the direction are hand in hand with each other, and we're just confused? We're not quite sure. Because the number one thing you and I had talked about before, and I think everybody else should definitely do if you're trying to find your own identity, is do not get on this and follow other people's identity.
Sure.
And try to hijack that identity to be yours. Because what do? Obviously, we need to look at other people. We run businesses. We need to see what's going on with the SEO and trends and algorithm. But to a certain extent, that's what makes people feel like failures. That's what makes people feel like they have no identity, because all they do is look at that phone and look at the life everyone else is living. And it does tie in your fitness journey as well, because we don't think automatically this person's on growth, this person's on trend, this person's on steroids. Right? We're just saying that person is in amazing shape and they look great and the lighting's perfect and their striations. I mean, they weren't pumping up with bands for 20 minutes before this photo shoot. You know, we can't. We just see the result and we don't realize, number one, might be all the work that goes into it, but number 2 and 3 could be smoke and mirrors that you're looking at that are not realistic. And that ruins your path to finding an identity that suits you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right there. It will ruin by watching.
Does it to us?
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah. But I think to your question of like, why do we feel the way we feel at the end of the day sometimes? And we just feel like we haven't accomplished anything, feel like we haven't got anything done. And for everybody listening, and I think a lot of people fall into this is, I don't know that it's 100% that you're out of alignment with your identity. I think it's just you know, the end goal, or you don't, maybe you don't know the end goal. So sometimes for me, I feel like while I'm figuring out direction is, I know who I am. I know who Mike Behrens is, you know, like, and I feel good about who I am as a person, but that doesn't translate into a goal and a career goal of where I'm heading, right? Like, I know where I'm at, and my identity as a man, a father, a husband, like, I'm good here. I feel good in that. The piece that I think we fall into sometimes, and a lot of people probably fall into, is that you haven't set the vision, right? So a couple episodes ago, we talked about the importance of a vision. And I think that's more of our issue. And I think that's more of other people's issue, where you don't have the vision of where that's going to take you. You know, figuring out your identity is different than figuring out the vision of where that goes now. So like, you figure out who you are and then create a vision of, where is this identity of who I am going to take me in the future? And I think for me, I know a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm not 100% clear on that vision. And so at the end of the day, did I really move towards that vision, or did I move away from that vision? I was still in alignment with who I am as a person and my identity, but because of that lack of clarity in my vision, I think that's what both of us fall into. I think you feel pretty strongly about who you are. I think you know who you are. I think your identity on YouTube and your identity to the outside world might be in a little bit of a flux sometimes, because there's options, but deep down, you know who Stevie Richard, you know who Michael Manna is, right? Like, you know who that guy is. Yeah. And so that's not the question. It's the vision that we fall into sometimes. But if you didn't have that identity as a foundation of knowing who you were, then now you've got a false vision of whatever you're chasing because of you don't know who you are and you don't figure that out. And so this is like the step before the vision of figuring out who you are. And for you and I, that's just where I feel like we're pretty good with who we are. We just need some more vision. And so for everybody listening, figure out your identity, then we can take the next steps and really start to achieve all the things that we want that are in true alignment with who we are.
I think the wild card and all that stuff is our brands are us. But
Oh,
it's
sure. Yeah.
fused into one. That's what I mean. The identity, like we were talking off camera before the show, and I got that ski erg, which has been my albatross just in the short time I had it. But the ski erg is not like I was really telling the company that is more of a product for you, since now you're really fully embracing the CrossFit world,
Sure.
products that really align with CrossFit, supplements, stuff like that. I would pass that to you because I know that's not really my identity. And I turned around and said, well, it's a free ski erg machine and I'm going to review it and somebody could use it. And I talked
Sure.
myself into it. But then when I look at it, my identity also is in my mind, at least, is not having a bunch of clutter and garbage in the garage gyms that isn't serving a purpose for my fitness journey, which I need to
Yeah.
kind of figure out how my fitness journey is going to align with the channel and with people, hopefully, that it can identify with the content. But I'm getting into, dude, I'm not gonna, I make no bones about it. I'm going through a midlife crisis. It's just it's an inverse midlife crisis.
Sure.
I don't want more stuff. I don't want more things. I don't want, bling. I don't want recognition. I don't want all these things. I really honestly just want quality over quantity. I
Mhm.
want minimalism to a certain degree with business. It's not, fully achievable that I want on a personal level. And
Sure.
I just want, I think number one thing you and I want, because this is why we're struggling with vision and maybe a little bit of identity with our businesses and stuff. We want peace,
Sure.
want peace in our life. And we want it to be like, and maybe we're chasing something that, like people say, it's the journey, not the destination. But
Mhm.
we're trying to figure out what the destination is because of all the things in pro wrestling that are super complicated, convoluted, downright head scratching, and what in the world is going on. The path to success is a very, very linear one theoretically. Maybe there'd
Mm.
be all these hiccups with injuries or heat or all this other stuff, or somebody politically doesn't want you in WWE, but the path is pretty simple. I'm going to
Sure.
go to wrestling school. I'm going to train. I'm going to work the indies. I'm going to pay my dues. I'm hopefully going to get in great shape. Then I'm going to go to a company that'll maybe have a little bit of exposure on TV. Then I'll go to another company that might have a little more. And then hopefully I end up in WWE. I make multi-generational wealth and I retire. Which,
Sure.
by the way, those last two parts hardly ever work out for any of us. So, but do you see what I mean? It's an
Yeah.
incredibly finite path that we could see since we were teenagers.
Mhm.
This is why it might the companies might be different, the players, the bookers, the promoters, but you're looking to go from a small fish to a big fish. You
Mm.
know, your ultimate goal is a big fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
And anything along the way is just on the path to that.
Sure. Sure.
But now that we're in what we're in, there's 1,000 different ways to go. And it's like we didn't know how easy in a way we had it in wrestling to show us the path to success. Right
Sure.
now we're not quite sure. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? I know
Yeah,
there
it
are
does make
certain
sense.
people you can look at, but you got to sift through the weeds to try to find them.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense the way you're saying it. And one thing that I feel that jumped out to me when you were talking there is you mentioned the minimalism piece of it, and in your business, you very much so have a minimalist mindset, and that's you could say part of your identity is being a minimalist, and that's how you want to live. And so when you get out of alignment with
A
that,
failing minimalist.
well, yeah, right. So that's where when you get out of alignment with that, it messes with you. And to get to um, the next piece of that, where you said you want peace, you want peace at the end of the day. That's what you're chasing, right? And I think what, and to put this into wrestling terms, I'll do that in just a second. But like finding that peace is in direct correlation to your identity and knowing your identity. And so for you, in the fitness piece of this, your peace comes when you're fully in alignment with being a minimalist. And the tension that you're fighting is, my business needs to have equipment. Too much equipment is out of alignment with me as a minimalist. And there's defining the happy medium there of the two to have that level of peace where you're okay with it. And so there's a struggle there. So you got to manage that tension. So then when we talk about it in the world of professional wrestling, and we can use the analogy because I'm sure a lot of our listeners know professional wrestling and they get it. But what's one of the things that I've always heard and you hear guys talk about is, the best characters in wrestling is that person, but they just turn the volume up a little bit, right? Like how many times have you heard that? So I would say that is a person who knows their identity and knows who they are and is so confident in who they are. And so to use the success journey that you talked about in wrestling, the ones that fly through that and excel through that are so confident in their identity and what their ability is and what their capability is that they step into that character and they be that character because that's who they are. And so then they can turn that up. And then on the flip side of that, you look at guys who have 45 different gimmicks in 4 years and they don't have any idea who they are and they never get any traction and they're throwing whatever at the wall to see if it sticks and see if it happens. And you can use that analogy. And so now take it into their personal life. Is their identity out of alignment with who they are as a person? And so then out of alignment with their characters, and then their character doesn't line up with who they are. And you might be able to poke holes in some of this too, but the overarching theme here is, if you're going to use the analogy, you figure out who your identity is, and that will take you to the top in whatever your chosen profession or whatever goals in life you have. But if you constantly are trying to figure out your identity and figure out who you are, and you're changing your gimmick every 5 seconds and doing this, you're never going to figure out fully who you are as a person and really achieve the highest level of success that you can possibly have with a false identity,
I was going to say, usually I would say drink every time you hear identity in this episode, but do 5 push-ups since it's a fitness show. I just keep people playing the game. So pause it every time one of us say identity right now, do 5 push-ups and then come back. There you go.
Oh shoot.
You're right though. You're right. There's lots of times. I mean, the only pushback I would give is like, the heel part of me in wrestling. There was some part, right to censor about, the product and what I didn't like about WWE at the time. So yeah, that was actually part of who I was really as a person, my identity. So
sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But in the fitness space, this is where, and let's talk a little bit to people that are just like, okay, you talked about the 10,000 foot look at everything and the self-help and all that stuff. Number one, it does help because when you're scatterbrained about everything, it's going to spill into your workouts. It's going to spill into your diets. You're going to be impatient. You're going to say, this isn't working after a week. I got to switch it up. We've all been there. So that's what I'm saying. You have to find out where you are, what really works for you. It has to, and you don't always have to do stuff that you don't like. As a matter of fact, you can avoid a lot of stuff that you don't like. We had an episode about exercises we avoid for one reason or the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's always another way to achieve the goal you need to. You don't have to do the set thing. So you at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, you're always going to be changing the identity of your fitness journey. You're going to need to do that. But without a baseline, without a foundation, without realizing how you can do certain things and who you are within the fitness space, you're not going to find that out. So if you want to talk to anybody brand new, when you're working out, stick to a very basic foundational thing. Could be CrossFit, could be your basic 5x5, could be Wendler, could be an old Arnold split from the 60s or 70s. Whatever it is, you need to stick with that, make that part of your identity. You are a bodybuilder, you are a CrossFitter, you are a long distance runner, you are whatever you are. Then you can start sprinkling in other things when you perfect that identity.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? I think you can't do crazy like go from CrossFit to Orange Theory to this to that, week to week to week. You're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, changing that frequently is just not it's not good for you. It's not going to help you make the progress that you want. And so figuring out your identity as it relates to fitness, I think you're right. You're spot on with that and saying not changing. I also think to add to that is don't feel like your identity has to be what you see on social media. You talked about it a little bit ago.
Oh,
Don't get on the phone and do it. And don't look at social media and think, man, I got to look like that, or I'm just a lazy piece of crap. Like you don't have to have that same journey. And let's be real, nobody puts their true fitness journey on social media. You get the highlights. Don't compare your every day to someone's highlights, because we all put our highlights on social media. Very few people actually share the real rawness of what happens on social media, because it's just the nature of it, right? And so
so
don't
basically,
let
my highlight was giving the middle finger to the ski erg as I was assembling it.
well, very
That's the
few is what I
best.
said. Very
That's
few.
that's the best I can do as a human being.
No, I
Okay,
would say very few
I
people. You're
know,
one
I
of the
know.
few that will share. But like the fitness influencers, they're selling fitness, so they got to go on there and they look. And the thing is that a lot of people get guilty of, and it's in the CrossFit space. You look at CrossFit athletes, and this is why CrossFit, to uh, my opinion, gets a bad rap, is because you look at these CrossFit athletes and they're all jacked up and they do these crazy movements and stuff. You can be a CrossFitter and not be that, right? Like you can do these things. And so you feel like you have to have this version of yourself, but that's not you. And you don't want to be that. Okay. So fine. No big deal. You can still use whatever training to get yourself in shape and to start your fitness journey. It's just figure out what that is for you. Whatever you're going into, figure out what you are and what you want from it, and where it makes sense to what you want. Don't think about, we talk about it. Don't take advice from someone who doesn't have the life you want. Okay. And so that's part of your identity. Don't let your identity be dictated by someone else's. And just because someone else loves CrossFit and loves to eat clean, well, you should always eat clean, but I don't know where I was going with that. But just because somebody else has an identity doesn't mean you have to do the same thing in the same path. What worked for them might not work for you, but what worked for them might work for you. It's just figuring out who you are and being so confident in that, and taking that into every area of your life, and specifically in fitness. Not trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime when you're just starting out. You're just not going to be.
It's a very dangerous thing when you start to look at that, because that will
Yeah,
inspire you, but it also creates unrealistic expectations, because there's other factors that we talked about before that may not be natural to get the
yeah,
people to look like they do. Yeah, I would definitely get off social media. I would, if you're going to get on, research your programs and get reviews and stuff like that, if you're going to buy a program online or something. But
sure.
after that, I would just trust the process, do it, and go with that. And I've been trying to get rid of social media, because I think the social media too kind of just detours us away from the direction and the productivity. Like you said it before, I do the same thing, the doom scrolling or whatever you call it, where 15,
Yeah,
20, 30 minutes goes by like nothing. And I'm like, man, 30 minutes, I could have legitimately produced that video I was just talking about, life after
yeah,
professional wrestling. It's not fancy. I can just sit there, be rolling some still photos and some
yeah,
video, and I'm done.
yeah,
But that 30 minutes could have grown my business, my channel, and everything else. Even 30 minutes of just watching a tutorial on how to set up my studio or the podcast, or
yeah,
and there's so many more things that can be done. So,
yeah,
and I would say this to everybody out there. We said it before the show. Nobody can be Big Mike Burns. Nobody can be Stevie Richards, and nobody can be you.
yeah,
That's your strength. You
yeah,
might think it's a weakness, but I'm telling you, in the end, if you're very honest with yourself, and if you're creating content, especially, and putting a brand out there, if you're honest and transparent about who you are and what you are and how you, if you're not the best person, how you're working to change, and they follow your journey, nobody can duplicate that.
mhm,
Nobody.
yep,
There's over 8 billion people in the world, and not one of them is you.
yep,
Please, it sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. And we need to tell ourselves that, because we're literally in a cattle call, a meat packing plant, whatever it might be in the wrestling and the fitness world, has
Sure.
nothing to do with the things we take pride in, how
Yeah.
we can create in our technical knowledge and our how we're trying to be one man show and run our
Yeah.
brands by ourselves.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
take one look at us and say, "Oh, you don't have a six pack. I'm not buying anything from you."
Right.
It's
Right.
that's all it is.
Yeah.
I
No,
don't know
it's
where I
true.
was going with that, but
Well, and I think to translate that into someone who's not building a brand and not focused on that, like it carries over into your everyday life, how you're showing up and how you're presenting yourself. And I think what it boils down to is being completely authentic with who you are and completely authentic. And it was something that came up too while you were talking there. It was this idea of realistic, like have an identity and not being so delusional that you think your identity is one thing when it's really not, like making sure that when you're sitting down and you're figuring this out, that you're being very realistic with yourself of where you're at and getting uh, a real measure of who you are. And so then that can then translate. And I'll say to your point of nobody can be you. Nobody can be you in whatever it is that you do. Nobody can love someone the way that you can. Might be different. Nobody's going to work the way that you can. Nobody's going to care for a friend the way that you can. Nobody's going to do the things the way that you can do them because you're different. But being confident in who that is and who you are and fully stepping into it and not being afraid of it. I can tell you that most times in my career, when I was really authentic to who I am, and I've been a salesman for a long time, I would have success when I was just being me. But if I tried to sell like someone else, if I tried to like mimic the sales approach of another person, it was so fake and so authentic, and I couldn't do it. And I had no success whatsoever. But when I was selling something that I truly believed in and I was authentically me and never pushed anything on people, that's where I've had all of my success, is because I knew who I was and I stepped into that and I was authentic in who I was because of the foundation of my identity. So I think that's the last time I should say identity.
everybody's everybody's on the ground grabbing their chest because you tore all their pecs during this episode. That's
Sorry.
okay.
Well, let's wrap it up then, because I think I don't know that there's anything else to say. I mean, just re-listen to the episode. I hope everybody got some value from it. I mean, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, the only thing I would push back on just very quickly about being realistic, because once people tend to hear realistic, they just close the door on their dreams and their vision. You got to temper that. You don't give up on your dreams.
Yeah, that's not what I
I
meant.
know, but when you
Yeah.
say when you want to do something, be realistic with it. You and I weren't realistic with anything we've done, according to other people. I don't know how you do it. You just got to be very measured with it. In other
Sure.
words, self-assess realistically what you can accomplish at the time and where you want to go, and then stick with it. I don't know how to verbalize it, but do not conflate or confuse being realistic with your actual dreams that you want your life to fulfill.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what I meant there was be realistic with where you're at right now. Don't ever be realistic with your goals. Set the most audacious goals that you can possibly set, because you'll never achieve anything. Even if you set a goal of the biggest goal you can possibly go, fine, please. I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer. And, I can't have the dream of one day getting in the WWE and not say, and then tell somebody else to be realistic, like
Yeah.
it's a very realistic thing. But like, to me, your dreams are you can't achieve any of your dreams if you're not realistic with where you're at currently. So that's what I meant when it comes to being realistic. If you're, overweight, like for me, I'm probably 15 to 20 pounds overweight right now, at least. And so I need to be realistic about that. I can't walk around thinking I'm this great in shape guy that is crushing it and looks like $1 million and is going to get picked up by the next, be the next guy, be the next top guy in any company, because it's not going to happen because I don't look the part. And so I need to be realistic with that. My dreams don't need to be realistic at all. Like there has to be a little level of realism to them. Like you can actually achieve them. But the point is dream big, go big or go home. I've always felt that, but be realistic with where you're at, because if you think you're further along than where you are, you're never going to get there, because you're going to miss that whole first part that you needed to do to get to the big dreams that you have. So yeah, set all the big dreams you want, but be realistic with your starting point. So cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for tuning into this week's episode of the Big Fitness Show. We appreciate you. Go find your identity. Do a couple more push-ups. If you got some value from this, share it with somebody who might also get some value from this. And we appreciate you listening. If you got some feedback for us, go ahead and send us an email, thebigfitnessshow@gmail.com. We would love to engage in conversation with you. And for myself, for the draw, Big Stevie Cool, this has been the Big Fitness Show. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Identity times 100.